Today on Biblical Higher Ed Talk, I sit down with John Mark Yeats, the new president of Corban University, to talk about his transition to the presidency. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm your host, Philip Dearborn, president of ABHE, and this is going to be a great episode. I've been looking forward to this. When John Mark said yes, agreed to show up on our podcast, I was super excited about it. He is the president of Corban University, and I had the privilege of being able to attend his inauguration. Oh, good grief. Was that a year
ago? May.
Was it May? Okay. Earlier this year. Time does weird things in this position. So, but really doing a great job. We've had numerous conversations. He had served at another ABHE institution and is now in the presidency and doing a phenomenal job in the Pacific Northwest, which if ever you get out to the Pacific Northwest, it is such a beautiful part of our country, particularly in the months of May, June, and July, right?
Absolutely.
I've had conversations with a number of new presidents, and I think there's some lessons that we can learn for those of you who are younger in your leadership careers, seeking perhaps to be a president. And we have also had presidents who have been reflecting back over their entire career as retired presidents. But it's been interesting having conversations with presidents who are like 1 or 2 years in as they reflect back over their formational experiences. So that's what I've invited John Mark in to just have a conversation as he reflects back over the last couple of years as he's come in as a new president, first time president, and kind of share some of those experiences. What would he do differently? What lessons has he learned? So welcome to the show, John Mark.
Philip, thank you so much for having me. This is a huge honor. As you know, you and I have connected over the years through ABHE, especially through the prior institution that I served at, and just so thankful for the work of ABHE. And one of the things I think is a hallmark of ABHE is its investment in future leaders. Yeah. And for all of the listeners who are engaged in training and positioning yourself for God to be able to use you wherever he does in the future, ABHE is a great place to be able to build those skills and to learn. And I know it's part of my story, and it's definitely, hopefully, part of your listener's story as well. And I just appreciate your focus as leading this group to be able to do this so that we have quality Christian higher education available for years and years to come in our country and beyond.
Well, I'm honored that you said that. My leadership axiom is, you get better one decision at a time, one training at a time. And if our leaders are getting better just 1 inch at a time over time, that makes a huge difference. So thank you for saying that. Appreciate it. So we've got some great questions to interact with. Before we do that, I do want to ask you just kind of a reflective question. I've shared this in other episodes, but when you were in kindergarten, standing up in front of a kindergarten graduation, your very first graduation, and they said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I don't think you said college president, but maybe you did. Who knows? I've yet to have somebody say that that's what they aspired to be. So share with us some of those twists and turns in your life that God used to shape you to where you are now, sitting as president of Corban University.
That's great. I don't remember kindergarten. I know that in my early life, there were 2 different tracks that I really wanted to follow. One was either to be a lawyer or an archaeologist. Those were the 2 pieces that I was really interested in. The lawyer bit got stamped out very quickly when I ended up doing, as a high schooler, kind of an internship with a local lawyer, and was bored out of my mind and hated it. It wasn't enough. There was no trial action. It was all, research and books. And I didn't like that part. So I kind of pursued the archaeology thing, and God gave me a unique opportunity to study at Hebrew University in Jerusalem and do archaeology as an undergraduate student. And I ended up on a dig, like one does, realized very quickly I didn't enjoy having dirt everywhere. And this was not a great thing, but I loved the history component. And so I ended up, twists and turns, you end up in history. And one of the things that God did was he placed in my life, like he does in all of our lives in so many fascinating ways, men who kept recognizing skill sets in my life. One of those men was a dean in my undergraduate experience who pulled me aside my senior year and just said, "John Mark, God has some leadership things that he's going to want you to do, and you need to continue to prepare. This is just what you're going to do." He had no roadmap for me, had nothing. It's just like, you need to continue to prepare however you can. As, kind of time goes on, I spent some time serving in full-time ministry. I did my PhD, but one of my roles in my PhD program at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School was I worked with the history department, doing administrative things. And one of my faculty there, John Woodbridge, who is such a sweet saint of God, he said, John Mark, you really excel at this administrative stuff. Have you ever thought about pursuing something like a presidency down the line? That was the first time I think the idea had been placed in my head that this is actually something that people set out to pursue, or that you become open to do. And I still wanted to finish my PhD. I wanted to write books, which I did. And I wanted to do all these kinds of things. I wanted to be a faculty member. I got a chance to do that. So God was kind in all of those processes, but that kept nagging in the back of my head. And then as you serve in some of your first academic roles, what do you end up getting to do right away? I'm running a program. I'm, on committees. I suddenly am the chair of the department. I'm doing all these other kinds of things. So those same giftings are being acknowledged in others. And so you begin to recognize, okay, maybe this is something that the Lord might have for me. And then being able to recognize that actually, I think this is a calling that God has on my life, and I need to pursue that.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the themes that comes through in a lot of our conversations on this podcast revolve around discipleship, and so many stories of, you mentioned a couple men in your life who were instrumental. Maybe they flew in and flew out of your life, but they left marks along the way that kind of shaped you. And the responsibility in this discipleship, that it's about what we've received and what has shaped us, but then what are we doing to then disciple others who are the next generation coming up? And that goes to some of your initial comments about ABHE, is where we're just laser focused on, boy, that's the continuity. That's how we become better leaders, learning from others, but then imparting what we've learned then to the next generation of leaders coming up.
So right.
Yeah.
So true.
Talk about some of the formational experiences that you had that shaped you to pursue the presidency.
Yeah, once I recognized this, maybe a sense of call, I began to intentionally on my own pursue some opportunities. So there were things that I know that, or I thought a presidency might entail. Fundraising, that's a key part. Leadership components, again, another key part. And then continuing to cultivate your own field of study as one does. So I took some time to make sure that I attended some conferences, like the American Council of Education always does these fundraising type things. I did a fundraising for deans. At that time, I was in a dean's role. How does a dean fundraise, and how does a dean contribute to the overall economic health of an institution? That was fantastic, and it helped me start thinking in new and creative ways. But I would say that ultimately for me, one of the most formative components was actually the institution I served at last, Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary and Spurgeon College. I served under a president who, when I told him, even in my interview, this is what I think God's calling me to in the future, he embraced that and was not intimidated by that, did not think that was something where I was after his job or anything along those lines, and actually helped cultivate in me more of those opportunities. So every time I was turning around, there was a new set of responsibilities that I was able to steward and shape, and then we would pass it off to someone else, and I take on a new set of responsibilities. And there were those types of things where, for over a decade, I'm serving on cabinet at one of the fastest growing institutions in the United States, and you're getting your feet wet in every single aspect of the organization, from financial to academic administration and accreditation and all of these other pieces. That shapes you. And you're in that particular context, we had an environment where we could experiment a little bit, that we could fail a little bit, that we could pick back up and keep moving forward. And that's not everyone's experience, and that's not everyone's opportunity, but it definitely was for me. And it was incredibly formative to be able to think through that way, and even to be able to make mistakes within a context, and then be able to have the wherewithal to be able to look back through and have a team around you who's like, I think we could have done this better this way, and then to work together and to see that really take place.
Yeah, great. leadership lessons just in that. I often encounter young leaders who ask the question, what do I need? Kind of waiting around almost in a passive way for the thing to fall into their lap that's going to propel them on, not necessarily into the presidency, but advancing in their leadership career. And you start out by saying, which I think is a powerful piece of, you sought it out. Like you were motivated to seek out things, skill sets, experiences, conversations that would potentially contribute, or that would contribute to your trajectory of leadership. Whether it would lead to the presidency or not, you made it very clear that you were, one, pursuing those things, and then open communication with your president that, hey, just so you know, and you and I have talked about this before, like, hey, if it threatens you or you don't want to hire me, I just want you to know that this is a trajectory that I feel that God has called me to. Are you okay with that? Yep. Some presidents may react negatively to that, but in this case, top-notch president there at Midwestern, Jason embraced that.
Man, he's so good. And he develops good leaders. And consequently, because we had that, not only the bandwidth institutionally to be able to do this, but he built a team and continues to build a team there of younger leaders that are coming through, and you get to test your mettle. You can't do these things conceptually. You have to get into battle. You have to be able to engage in some of the difficulties. And if you don't ever develop in that way, it is going to be incredibly hard to be in a seat or in a situation where you're leading an institution and having to make high level decisions that affect the lives of hundreds of people. So you have to be able to get in some of those licks. You have to be able to fail. You have to be able to dust yourself back off and get back up. You have to be able to see some wins. You got to have those experiences, and you got to walk through those.
Yeah, there's a great axiom, fail forward fast. That is such a great marker for an institution, really a value, how we treat each other in institutions is a culture that fails, but fail forward, learn from your mistakes and do it fast. Don't wallow in your failure. That's such a fine balance for us to achieve. So
true.
Yep. Okay. So now you're the president. You've been president now for how long?
For 18 months. Woohoo!
18 months. Okay. There is always a gap from what we expect to what reality is. So with what you're comfortable to share, you don't have to share everything, but what expectations fell short of reality now that you're a president?
Expectation wise, I did not expect to enjoy what I do as much. It's kind of a different way of thinking about it. I love the privilege of what I have to do. I love it. I just always assume that when we're called to do things and we pursue those, sometimes it's just good work, and good work is good. And it's satisfying. It's something that you're engaging in, and it's positive, but it's not always fun. It's not always an enjoyable experience. My wife and I enjoy this. This is something that's incredible. And so I think in that respect, that was something I didn't quite expect. I expected it to be satisfying, but I did not expect it to be as enjoyable as it is. I also didn't expect how integral my wife was going to be into this role. When I was negotiating with the search committee and other things, I had learned from a few other people how important it is to maximize your spouse's participation to the extent that they're comfortable, and then to ensconce that within our contract, because I didn't want my wife left out of what was going on, because I believe she's an asset to what we're doing. What's turned out to be the case is that it's absolutely the case. So my wife and I frequently travel together, and so when I'm making fundraising appeals to maybe it's a widow or a single person, and my wife has a really great ministerial component as well, where she is just able to come alongside someone and to be where they are, and there's just a wonderful combination between the two of us together. I was teasing my board chair the other day. We did our first annual review, and my wife's name is in my annual review multiple times about how her hospitality, her, engaging. And I was like, my wife doesn't like that. Please leave her out of the next one. But it's a team. There's a respect as a couple. We've always kind of treated ministry as a team sport. It definitely is the case in this. And we find that so enjoyable to be there. When we live on campus, so we're in the middle of everything, we're
and if you see the campus, you literally are in the middle of
literally.
everything. Yeah. Which can be good and bad, right?
Yeah. In this case, it's great, but I can understand the bad part. And some people, that's just not their gearing, right? There's some people, that's not what they want. My wife and I are a very open book. That's just how we roll. We love getting to be a part of all of this. This week, my wife, for example, when we're recording this, she's going actually with the recruiting team out to do recruiting. I'm here doing other stuff, and she's doing that. So we're just, it's a team sport, and that I think was not an expectation. It's all structured so that she's not on the payroll, she's not anything else. But as we've invested in Corban University and what God is doing here, we see the unique nature of this incredible institution, and we both want to be engaged.
Yeah. That's such a great axiom of leadership, because you're in it with a spouse in most instances. Were you married when you knew that you wanted to be a college president? Like, how did she interact with you pursuing a presidency, knowing that probably meant you're going to move to where the position is?
Right. We always understood, we got married before I did my PhD work. And so from that point on, there was always understanding that whether God called me into more ministry related aspects or academic aspects, we just kind of have to go where God calls us. Yeah. And that's not been an issue for her. That's just what we've done. It has been absolutely fantastic to be able to do that together. So the idea of accepting presidency, and God is so kind in the way that he does these things. My wife went to Oklahoma Baptist University for her undergraduate in education. And the president's wife actually taught in the School of Education.
Wow.
And she spent time with her helping do hospitality things and other things. And so that was in her mind the expectation. If we're going to do this, we're going to do this together, and I'm going to be engaged, and we're going to do these other things. And so again, God in his kindness put all of these pieces together in a way that I don't think I could have ever even tried to do in an effective way. And it was awesome. It's been awesome.
I wonder too if there's an added benefit of she's involved in your life. And I do hear from a lot of college presidents and from their spouses that they often feel disjointed and they don't really always know all that's happening, because president there are stresses that come with the job. Maybe it's a grounding for you too, where she's with you all the time and knows you the best out of anybody, right? With her there and present, it kind of keeps you grounded in what you say, how you approach things. You're in it together as a couple. It's almost like a pastoral kind of a thing that you're doing.
I would think that for most of our ABHE schools, that for those of us who are in key leadership roles, whether you're president or a dean or a provost or anything, we all understand there's a pastoral element to what we do, because that's part of a character of our institutions. And so to be able to do this together maximizes and actually expands the amount of influence that we can have on our campus. This semester, there was a young lady who was missing home, and she's like, I miss baking. And my wife said, well, come on over and she brought a bunch of girls, and they just cooked cookies in the kitchen. And that was just an awesome way to minister to a student who was feeling homesick. But at the same time, it allows us to do exactly what the promise of Christian education is, which is holistic formation of the individual, right? We're wanting them to develop, not just academically, but spiritually and individually as a person that God created to make a difference in the world for Jesus Christ. And so it's just part of that bigger picture. And that, to me, I think has just been such a sweet, sweet thing. There wasn't an expectation for that was articulated, but as we kind of stepped into that was just such an incredible thing that we've been able to see have happen.
Yeah. The first thing that you mentioned, let's park on that a little bit. You talked about that you didn't think that you would enjoy it as much as you are enjoying it. Talk a little bit deeper with that from the sense of alignment. So in leadership, in people in positions, we talk about, your skill sets, your capacities, chemistry, those kinds of things. Talk a little bit more about enjoying the position and how important that is. Like that's how it should be.
It's how it should be. But we all know, and maybe this is just my years in ministry. So there was a season where I left academia for a while and pastored. And I liked pastoring. It was good. It's good work. It's a great calling that God enables us to work. I liked what I did. I didn't love what I did.
Mm.
I would have served the rest of my life as a pastor, liking what I had the privilege of serving the kingdom of God to do that, right? It's a good thing because the work is good. And I may have learned this a little bit from my grandfather. My grandfather never took any education beyond 8th grade. He worked for General Motors most of his life, putting together cars in Arlington, Texas. He was the hardest working person that I knew. And if you ever asked him about his work, he's like, oh, it's just work. It pays the bill. He said, what I love to get to do is to be able to invest in people at our church. And that's what he did. He was always, I would go spend some weeks in the summer with him. And what were we doing? We were going to put a roof on Sister So-and-so's house because, they fell in a hard way. Or we were working on Brother So-and-so's car because they didn't know how to do it and they didn't have any money. And he was always doing that kind of stuff. So the work was good because it was work and it was honorable and it was the right thing that God had given for the family. It was good, but his enjoyment came in service. And maybe that's where I'm even trying to put this together, that as a president, I have the privilege of serving an entire community. And in some respects, it's different constituents, right? I'm serving the faculty, making sure that they have the opportunity to blossom and to grow and to be able to produce fantastic graduates. And I have the opportunity to invest in a student body who love Jesus and want to grow and want to be difference makers in the world for Jesus Christ. Our mission is to educate Christians who make a difference in the world for Jesus Christ. And we want to live that. But it's also to alumni, and it's getting to be a part of their story and what's going on and seeing how this institution has made a difference since 1935. And it's all of these different pieces and even connecting with donors who are excited about how do we give to continue a mission of an institution that we deeply believe in, even if they're not an alum? So it's all of those pieces. And there's a certain enjoyment that I find that all of these pieces come together ministerially, professionally, and others in just a unique way that I find absolutely enjoyable.
Sometimes in leadership and trying to determine what God's plan is for you, like you've shared a couple examples here, which shaped you to this point for maximum enjoyment. So for example, you thought that you wanted to be an archaeologist, right? Well, sometimes God teaches us what he has for us by saying, well, that's good. And I thought I'd enjoy that, but no, I'm good. I don't like the dirt. What was the first one?
A lawyer.
Lawyer. There you go.
I didn't want to sit in the office.
Right. But how would you know that until you actually had some experience and put yourself into that environment? Like, no, I think I'm good with that. Sometimes we learn what God has for us and what does actually genuinely bring us joy by trying things that, okay, you did the pastor thing. It's important. It's good. You enjoyed it. It didn't quite maximize your enjoyment. And so you continue to pursue. And too often we settle for safety reasons, for fear reasons, for any number of things. We settle into something that, we can do it. And it's using some of our gift set, but am I really enjoying it? No. And the thing I love about you, and I've interacted with you on a number of occasions now, that joy comes through. Like in conversations, like you can just tell that like, this is your baby. God has called you. You're stewarding this thing and you're just all in and you're making it happen. And it's great to see that it really comes out of your conversations. It
really is. And it is a joy. I'm coming in as the 11th president at this institution, and I'm the second person who's an outsider. That's it. Wow. And so there's been a long tradition of insiders, and there was some concerns initially by some of our long-term faculty, by many of our constituents, that I'd be able to embrace the story. But one of the things that I, again, have loved is, and again, this is one of those not expected things. My job is not to promote John Mark Yeats. My job is not to use an institution as a platform for my advance. My job is actually to be a servant of the institution to ensure that this institution's mission carries forward well into the future. I may never have another book contract. I may never have an opportunity to do speaking. I may never have any of that stuff ever again. What's important is the continuation of a God-called, God-gifted institution that serves the churches and the broader community to be able to see excellence in education happen. And so that becomes my primary purpose. And so when we understand that, and it's about service, it's about staying faithful, it's about serving, and just understanding that that's kind of right sizing that role and that understanding, it just takes away a lot of the other pressures and allows you to be focused. And then it brings out that joy that I get to see things happen that are not explainable by me. And even from a human standpoint, it's only explainable by a loving God who's engaged in doing his work. And that only comes about when we are willing to simply be servants. And for anybody who's thinking about, gosh, I don't know where I'm supposed to go next or whatever, that is one of the biggest pieces of advice that I have for anyone is just be a servant. Allow God to take you where he wants to go. You don't have to stress over it. You don't have to manufacture it. I'm not talking about being passive, right? There's a difference between passivity and active preparation, but you just let God take care of all of the different steps and pieces. There was a span of about 6-7 years where I'd get, hey, would you apply for this? Would you do that? And you do all the applications and you do all the different things. And sometimes there was even an offer being made, and it's just like, it's not where I'm supposed to be. And I just know as a servant, that's not where I'm supposed to be. Yeah. And God eventually opened up all the doors here in just a crazy God honoring way. And it's where I'm supposed to be. Yeah. I'm serving, and I'll serve this until the Lord does something else. But I serve as if this is the last stop, and that we're going to keep working on this until the Lord says no more. And that's where I think I find joy, because there's a confidence in knowing that we serve a sovereign God who is wanting to affect his plan for the furtherance of his kingdom. And I don't have to stress.
Yep. Yep. 18 months into it, as you look back, do-overs, what would you do differently now that you're 18 months into it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like a lot of schools coming into this circumstance, I didn't have the luxury of going slow. We needed to do things quickly and fast to make sure that we were in a stable financial space and an enrollment space that we needed to be in. Sometimes you do get the luxury of going slow. And I think if I had all things perfect and a do-over, or if I was saying, hey, if there's something you should do, I think the better thing is to go slow and to build as many relationships as you can and to be able to do all of that. I was not able to do that in this particular case. Thankfully, the institution, I think, was kind of ready to go. Yeah. And so that there was a match and a pairing there that enabled us to be able to do that. So I feel like we've been running. So it was almost as if the marathon was already going and we're already halfway through the race, and you just get pulled out, and it's like, we need you to still keep this 8-minute pace, and let's just go. And so there's a piece here where that I really enjoy, and it's great. If I could have other circumstances in place where I could go slower, that definitely would be a number one do-over. But again, I think we were primed and ready for that. The other piece where I was not thrilled about is I'd been given all the financials. I'd been given all the other kinds of things in the interview process. I needed to have had a more detailed conversation with the CFO about things that I saw as somewhat irregular, but just kind of, I assume that it's X, Y, or Z. Because there was a very bad day within the first 3 months when I finally am sitting down with the CFO going, okay, now explain to me why this is showing up this way. And I found out we had more debt than I thought we had. Wow. It wasn't a huge thing, but it was just the way that it was cataloged was not normative from what I had seen in other places and experienced. You got to change gears. You got to shift in terms of what we're wanting to accomplish immediately. Yeah. But okay, all things being equal, we're gonna take and run with it. I should have had some more detailed conversations about where the some of those places were. Or I was reading the balance sheet and I thought it looked like this, and so I can read a balance sheet. I know where it is, and it was buried in some categories that it was not what I expected.
Yeah. Yeah. When somebody does go through a search process, it's kind of like a dating relationship on both sides of it. You're looking at school's looking at you. And a lot of times there's a reluctance to, show the full picture and to ask some of the hard questions along the way. Of course, had you known some of those things, maybe it would have influenced the decision that you made, or at least gotten you started quicker in addressing some of those things, right?
That maybe.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That maybe.
But what a testimony to the fact that here you are 18 months later and you're celebrating a 10% increase in enrollment. And this is awesome. That is fantastic. So, well, listen, we have 1 minute left. So you can choose, give some words of advice, maybe one word of advice. A lot of our listeners are young, emerging leaders in biblical and Christian higher education. What's that one word of advice that you would give to them as they're going down their journeys?
It's just simple. Faithfulness matters. Faithfulness matters. Stay faithful to where God has you. Stay faithful to your calling and preparing for whatever God would have for you in the future. Stay faithful definitely to your family. Stay faithful to the word of God. Stay faithful. Be known as a faithful steward of what God has given you. And God will continue to move you in the direction that he needs his faithful servants to be.
So simple. We make it so complicated.
Yes. Oh, do we ever?
Stay faithful. Great. Well, John Mark, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and kind of pulling back the curtain and for us to see what that transition was like.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And if you want to learn more about Corban University, you can click on the link that's provided in the show description to see what John Mark and his team are doing out in the Pacific Northwest. So until next time, stay kingdom focused.